judging based on a historical context. I'm not talking about judging people, right? Because, there's a lot of debate over that, whether people should be judged based on the context of today versus the past, whether they did something wrong or blah, 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 like racist. Talking about judging based on historical context when you don't realize it, like in a house. Many times you wonder why people made these decisions. Was it the bad decision, wrong decision? And for those of us who are younger, or those of us who don't know history, or the historical context, how things developed, we're often stupid, ignorant, just don't make any good judgments. We should just not judge. Let me give you an example. So when the roofers were fixing the house, one of the pipes fell through into our shower. And it's this big, heavy metal pipe, galvanized metal, steel or whatever it is. And the roofer's like, oh, this must be an important pipe. Don't do anything. We'll fix it when you want to fix. And I was like, yeah, telling my mom that, oh, yeah, better not use the water because I don't know. But it's not a water pipe. My dad told me later it's exhaust pipe. Exhaust as in for air. Why do you have a big metal pipe doing exhaust? It just sounds so silly. And it's because there wasn't plastic back then. The house was built in 1960. Plastics weren't developed. They don't have these lightweight, strong plastic pipes. Right? Isn't that funny when you think about what people did back in the day, did make use of what they had? A lot of these materials were not available, thus they couldn't use it. Right? Like us saying you should have done that is just stupid because that is not literally available. It doesn't exist. And it's like, you think about that, right? You're like, oh yeah, back then, you should have just done this over the internet, transferred the files. It's like, what internet? You mean the thing that you dial up that goes at 28K, 56K? Yeah. I could have transferred a file over that very, very easily. You know how big those hard drives were back in the days? Megabytes. Your disk, a few megabytes. I mean, we forget about that many times, the context. And in the medical field, I'm reminded of my attending, and I asked him a question, and he answered it based on historical context. I said, why do we have it in the ICU that people need to have their tube taken out after a few weeks, right? They're intubated, they have this plastic in their throat, and we read in the books that it erodes the throat, may cause a connection between your trachea, which is your air pipe, and your esophagus, which is a bad thing, right? But I asked him, why do you have to have it removed? And he says, you probably don't. It's just passed on because in the past, the pipes were hard plastic. Now they're flexible silicone. They could probably be in there for months and you're fine. Historical context, right? It's good to know why we believe certain things. Certain things change, certain things do not. But a lot of it has to do with historical context. What was available? Why do people think that way? It probably has to do with the fact that there was no plastic 60 years ago. And so when you wanted a big pipe, use metal, right? What else are you going to do? But at least 3 of us didn't realize that. And we didn't think back to, how old is this house? Why did they do this? Right? And I feel that's such an interesting thing, how we forget about context. When we're talking to somebody, we often don't forget about context. When you're talking to a little kid, you talk to them differently than an adult. You don't expect the same things out of them. But when we talk about history, we seem to forget what year we're in, what decade we're in, what century we're in. Right? Why is that? I can tell you for me, because I don't even remember my trip to somewhere. I don't even remember what year it is anymore. I'm bad with years. Plus, history of construction housing. I don't know. My dad would probably be better put to know because he studied construction and architecture. But does that mean that we're forgiven for making this mistake? I would say not. We should do some research, figure out the context, historically, was available, before we make any judgment calls.